Hey, thanks for checking out Nuts and Bolts with Tone. Welcome to my channel. Today I have a 2004 Dodge Sprinter. Now this is one where I wish I had known it was going to go down the path that it went, because I would have loved to have filmed some of this stuff along the way. But I'm going to let you know what it is and where we're at. So this is a 2004 Dodge Sprinter with a 2.7 liter engine, and it initially had a whole bunch of codes. Then we replaced the battery, did some front brakes, and the customer came to pick it up, wouldn't start. I got it to check it out, went out, scanned it, found all these codes, but two of the codes were cam sensor codes. So cleared all the codes, drove it in. By the time I got in the shop, light popped and it set a P2016 code. And that is a fuel rail PSI malfunction, fuel flow below threshold, or below, where it's supposed to be. So, okay, cool. So I got some more diag because I know this is going to take a little bit of testing. So step one, anytime you have a diesel, you always want to look at the fuel rail pressure sensor, the actual and desired. So you want to look at what the actual reading is and what the desired reading is. So it doesn't matter if you're working on a Duramax, a Cummins, a Power Stroke, a Dodge Sprinter, it doesn't matter. The actual and desired, they should be the same. I mean, they should be going up. You should almost be able to take the actual and lay it over the desired, and it should almost be a mirror image. And if it's not, then you know you have a problem. Now, I've made a few videos about this type of situation before. So basically what happens on a common rail diesel is you have a fuel rail that's only about this big around, and it's as long as the engine. So this is a V6, so the engine's about this, it's about this long, the rail is. So it doesn't have a lot of fuel in there. And so any malfunction in the fuel system will cause the whole system to have a problem. So I've got this thing running, and the first thing I did was, I always do this, is I kill all the injectors. So what I noticed in the beginning was that cylinder 1 and 5 had the biggest change. I felt the biggest drop in RPMs when I killed those injectors. 2, 3, and 4 had a drop, but not as much. So just one little key that I kept a note in my head that 1 and 5 were having a problem. So what I did after that was, the next step is to check the fuel return back. So on a diesel fuel injector, you have the common rail, you have the fuel tubes that connect to the injector, and then you have the return that comes off. So on a Sprinter, it comes out of the top and it returns back. So Sprinters especially, because this common rail is so small, the fuel rail is so small, it doesn't take much to cause a no start or a problem. So here's two examples. I had a Sprinter, a 2.7, I replaced the engine, put the guy's old injectors in, and it wouldn't start. One injector was bad. I did the test I'm going to show you, and I turned the key on without it even running, and it filled the tube all the way up without it running. So right there, it's empty in the rail all the way through that injector. So that one injector kept the whole engine from starting. Replaced that injector, it started. I had a Cummins, did the same thing. 5.9, replaced all the injectors with aftermarket, cheap injectors. Then it had a no start. One injector was bad. So I had to buy these block-off tubes on the Cummins to block them off to figure out which cylinder was losing all of the fuel. So on this one, to do a fuel return back test, it's got to be at full operating temperature. I tried it cold just to see what would happen. Even though I knew you can't run it cold, I just wanted to see. And when I did it cold, nothing happened. I mean, the tiniest bit of fuel came out. So I got it to full operating temperature. And what I found was, in the test, I'm going to show you, you put these tubes on top of these injectors, and 2.5 milliliters or 1.5 inches in a 3/8 hose, that's the equivalent, is what's supposed to return out of the injector. Disconnect the cam sensor, you put your tubes on there, and you crank it over for 10 seconds. And you measure the fuel that's in all of the tubes. And now I'm going to show you how this testing works, and I'm going to show you what the results are after I did the test. So let's go check it out. Before I show you that, hit that like button, hit subscribe button, and hit the bell. Most important, hit the bell so you get notified of all my future content, which you're definitely going to want to see. All right, let's go check it out. Let me show you how this goes. Okay, so this is the kit you need to perform the test. You can do this two ways. You can have this kit right here. You open it up here, and there's multiple ways to test, all right? You can, with it running, you can hook up these bottles, and they will measure the return back from the injectors, or you can use these guys on a Sprinter. This is what I've used in the past. I use this right here. It goes right in the top of the injector, all right? So what you do is you take the clips out. Here's what the clips look like, all right? You take the clips out of each injector, right? So your return lines, they sit inside like this, and they push down inside the injector, and the clip locks it in right there, all right? So to perform this return test, this return back test, you can either use this and you push this down on top of the injector. The only problem with these is sometimes they don't lock in, and every once in a while I have an injector that it's just the size of this tool and the size of the injector, it just doesn't fit. Because this is metal going inside of a metal injector, which is supposed to be, normally it's plastic. This is plastic. So what you do, another way to do it is you get 3/8 clear hose, all right? Now you need the engine to be at full operating temperature to perform this test. So right now I tried to do it to show for the video what it looks like, but it's too cold and I'm not gonna get this thing warmed up because I've already made a diagnosis on this. So I'm gonna explain to you how to do it. So what you do is you disconnect all your injector return lines, all right? You can either bend the return line in half and pinch it off and block the return line flow so that way fuel doesn't push out of all these ports, because then you'll have fuel everywhere, all right? I did that originally and I forgot to pinch it off. Or you can just disconnect it back here. What I did on this one was I just disconnected this return line right there from the fitting, and I just capped it, okay? Because this return line's real hard and I didn't want to break it, and so I just capped that off to keep fuel from pushing out. So once you have this at full operating temperature, you disconnect your cam sensor, which is right there, all right? And you crank it over for 10 seconds. Now the spec for this is in 10 seconds, it's 2.5 milliliters of fuel. Or, and if you have a 3/8 hose like this, it's 1.5 inches. So, all right, here we go. Got this 2004 2.7 Sprinter with a fuel flow too low code. Did a return test here. That one's good. That one's got too much. That one's got contaminated in the injector, and that one failed. Let's go. All right, here we go. Just got the injectors sold. We're gonna put some Bosch injectors in this. So you're gonna open it up, and the injector is gonna look like this. It should have a plastic protective sleeve over the tip, the threads, and also right there holding for the return line, and it will have a new clip. And then you should also have a brand new copper washer in each one. All right, so now we got to get these out. So what we're gonna need to get these out is I like to use pliers like this. This is Matco, probably Knipex. I like to use these, and all right, so trying to get the light here. Okay, so I just grab the clip and pull it out like that, all right? These don't matter now because we're replacing these, but what you wanna do is you wanna just twist and pull up and it'll pop out, all right? So that's how it pops out. We're gonna pop all these connectors off, all right? Looks like this connector is broken. We're gonna pop all these connectors off, and we're gonna take all the fuel tubes off. All right, all the fuel tubes are the same, and they're 14 millimeter. So we're gonna do that, and then we need to get the hold down bolt off that's right there. So before you disconnect any of these fuel lines, what you wanna do is take an air nozzle and blow all the debris out of this hole, because you don't want anything down in these injector holes. So once we get all the return lines off here, we're gonna pop all these clips off, disconnect the connector, take the fuel tubes off, Now these fuel tubes, you don't have to be worried because there's not high pressure fuel here right now. So you can crack them loose and just a little bit of fuel is gonna drizzle out. You wanna unbolt both ends, and then they should unscrew very, very easily. It should not be hard to unscrew them. And then it's gonna be a T40 for this Torx here. And then I'll show you how to get the injector out. It can be a little tricky. I don't have a puller for it. I just use screwdrivers and stuff and pop it out. So, all right, let me get this stuff disconnected and I'll show you how we're gonna get that injector out. All right, so for disconnecting injector fuel lines, I like to use an angle wrench here. These wrenches have a 30° on one end and a 60 on the other. These are snap-on. It's a 14 millimeter, but these are real good because if you turn them around between all 4 different ways, you can cover most angles that you need. That will cover most, and you should be able to get it out no problem with this. Okay, so I'll also let you know how to replace the fuel rail if you're doing this here. I'm replacing the fuel rail as well because I suspect an issue with the quantity control valve, which is back there. You're going to disconnect both electrical connectors. You got one back here for the fuel quantity valve. We're going to just disconnect that and put it up there. And you have one here for the fuel rail pressure sensor. You got 5 feed tubes for your injectors, right? So this is the number 1. Now this is the supply for the rail. This comes from the high pressure pump. So what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect this line here, and we're going to take out this Torx, all right, this E-Torx. And it's a, let's see, I think it's a third, let's see. It's an E10. So you're gonna take out the Torx here. All right, now you're gonna disconnect the rest of your feed tubes for all your injectors. You just disconnect them and move them out of the way, all right? Then you have your banjo back here. All right, so disconnect your return and just get it off of there, right? So here's your return. Just disconnect that so you're not fighting it. Disconnect this and it'll look like that, right? You'll have a washer and a 17 millimeter bolt and another washer. All right, so get those out of there. And then you have a couple bolts that are securing this fuel rail. I think there's 3. So you're gonna disconnect those. There's one here. I think there's one right there. Let's see. And one right there. Right, let's see, right there. All right, so we're gonna disconnect those, and then we should be able to finagle the rail like this and then get it up out from under the harness. You got this engine harness here, so we're gonna have to get it out of there. So you may have to maneuver your harness to get it out. But once you disconnect this E10 here, you should be able to move this line a little bit and have a little bit of room to get it up and out. All right, let me finish getting this up. Okay, so one of the things that I like to do is the injector. This is usually centered between that hole. So what I like to do is take a dead blow and I put the handle right here and I hit it this way and I knock this over, and then I come back with a screwdriver or a little pry bar here and I pry it back over, and then I knock it back and I pry it over. I usually do that about 4 or 5 times, because what happens is, here's the number 2 injector. What happens is it gets real stuck along the body here. So when we get done, what we're gonna do to prevent issues in the future is we're gonna put anti-seize all along the body here, all around the injector before we install it. So then what you got to do, without a puller, what you got to do is you got to put a pry bar in here and you got to kind of pry up, and then you put a screwdriver on this side and you just kind of pry that way, and then you pry up on this side, and you just got to kind of wiggle the pry bars back and forth until you can get it to pop out. But be real careful, because this valve cover is aluminum, so it would break really easy. All right, let me get these out. All right, so this number 3 injector, the one that had the brown coming out of it, all right, that one was incredibly difficult to get out. It didn't come out like normal. I even have a sprinter remover that I made. I took an old hold down and I redid the threads to fit my slide hammer, which is So here's my slide hammer for injectors, and I broke the adapter there. So what I ended up having to do was unscrew the top of the injector and pull out some of the insides. And we pretty much had to pry it from all angles, put vice grips on it, and twist like an animal. And then we finally got it where we were able to twist it, and we had to twist and pry up and twist and pry up. It took me an hour to get this one injector out because it was so stuck. And now this is what I was talking about that you have to worry about. Look what's not on the end, the copper washer. So you go here, copper washer. No copper washer there. So the fact that this injector was so stuck and having brown stuff coming out of it, that is an indication that we definitely had a problem there. So now I got to fish that copper washer out and get that bore cleaned out. All right, let me get this third one out. All right, so number 4 came out pretty easy. I barely even pried on this one and it came out. This one actually had anti-seize on it. So now I'm gonna get the bores cleaned up, and you can see the copper washer came out with this one. Usually the copper washer will come out unless there's been a problem down here in the bottom. So usually if you have a cylinder that's had a problem, that has a real problem, usually the copper washer will stay with the engine, and that's what happened with this one. And you can see what the end of this one looks like. And then they get all carboned up at the end. All right, so now I got to clean these bores up and get the injectors ready to install. All right, so to clean the bores, what I usually do is I get the biggest screwdriver I can get, and I feed a rag down the hole. And if the screwdriver's not big enough to grab the rag, it won't spin the rag. So I just wrap the rag around the handle, and then I twist. And I do that quite a bit, and then maybe I'll spray a little brake clean on there, and then I'll get a mirror and I'll look down the hole. So let's see if we can use a mirror. So you can see that that hole still is not clean. There's still a bunch of crap in the bottom of the hole. You can kind of see that. So I'm going to take an air nozzle and blow that out. This one's going to be way worse to clean because of all the crap that happened. On this one, because this is so bad, I may actually have to get my inspection camera out, my Carnage Tools endoscope, and check this out. All right, let's go. All right, here we go. Now we're going to get these injectors ready to go. So what you're going to do is you're going to pull your clip out. You're going to pop this cap off here. We're going to take off all these caps. All right, there's my new clip, okay? You're going to take your copper washer, and a lot of times you have to use on Power Strokes. Okay, this one just slides on. All right, so I have something for that. All right, what I like to use is assembly goo right here. This is for transmissions. I think that's what it's for. Anyways, so what I do is it's just green, kind of like grease. So I haven't used it in a minute. All I've done lately is Power Stroke injectors, and those copper washers you hammer on, so you don't need to use this. What I like to do is I like to put a little bit of the green goo around the injector, and then I put the copper washer on and I turn it, make sure it's going to stay, because you don't want it to fall off. The other thing that you want to do, and you can't do this in all of them, but you see that number right there, that 8A1B81, you're going to write that number down and put it in order of where it goes. That's a QA code. That's a quantity adjustment code that you have to put into the computer when we're all done. So I'm going to write these numbers down and notate what cylinder is what. The other thing that you want to make sure that you do, once you've cleaned your bores out, this is a perfect example. I've gotten all the injector bores clean, everything looks good, but look at this, look at that. That injector hold down hole is full. So I need to blow all of those out. This one's really full because this is the one where we had the problem. We had to spray a bunch of crap, and so you want to make sure that you clean out those bores so you don't hydrolock the hole. All right, let me get this all prepared, and then I'll tell you what the torque spec is. Okay, so I got all my injectors laid out. I got my numbers, my QA codes put on there. So now I'm going to try to do this one-handed without dropping it. And I'm right-handed, so this is not good. All right, so you can see I have all the goo. So I'm just gonna slide that up and then wipe off the excess, and it's gonna stay there. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna coat the body of this with anti-seize, and then I'm gonna slide it in. All right, let's go. All right, so here you go. So this is the hole that I had a problem with right here. So this will show you. You can see my copper washer is on the bottom. I've got this anti-seized up, and you'll see that I've got the bore cleaned really well when you watch that this just slides in like butter. So it's pretty much all the way down right there, okay? And look at that, I can move it. So that just shows you how well I have it cleaned. If you can't do that, your bore's not clean and you have a problem and you need to fix it. All right, so there's the torque spec right there. You're supposed to use brand new screws. I've rarely replaced the bolts. They don't come with the injectors. So you go 62 inch-pounds and then 90 degrees. So I'm gonna get these torqued up. All right, so what you gotta do is you gotta go into functional tests with a scan tool, and you gotta go into special functions, and you gotta go to injector programming. And that's where you have all of these codes here that you have to enter in. They're injector classification codes. So if you don't have the classification codes, you have to go get them off the injectors. So I can already see that injector 1, which is right there, is not programmed correctly. So I'm going to reprogram all these injector codes. All right, so after replacing the 3 injectors and the fuel rail, which houses the fuel pressure regulator, not fuel quantity valve. I was wrong on that one. So in the beginning, the fuel pressure, the desired and actual, it just wouldn't stay right where it was supposed to. So once I fixed the, once I replaced the injectors and replaced the fuel rail with the fuel pressure regulator, it seemed a lot better in the shop. It was running right. I got it up to operating temperature. When I killed all the injectors, all 5 injectors had the same drop as before. The two cylinder 2, 3, and 4 didn't have as much of a drop as 1 and 5. So it was a lot easier. It was a lot more even across the board. But when I went to drive it, it still set to P2016. But this time it was giving me a different, I think it was giving me a different subcode. But anyways, so what I found was that the fuel rail pressure was just not correct. It was off by quite a bit. And sometimes it was high, sometimes it was low. And so I have actually also had this problem be another component, and I'm gonna replace that. I'm gonna show you how to do that. And that is actually called the fuel quantity valve. I had them mixed up earlier in talking. The fuel quantity valve is it's a solenoid on the fuel pressure regulator, on the high pressure fuel pump. And that's what regulates the high pressure fuel. The fuel pressure regulator is on the rail. That's a little bit different. That's what returns the fuel. And then you have the fuel pressure sensor. So the fuel quantity valve is different. So I'm going to show you how to replace that. Let's go check that out. That's got 3 screws and it's on the front of the pump. So let me show you how to do that. Let's go check it out. So the fuel quantity solenoid is right here. There's the connector right there, and it's that shiny solenoid right there sticking out the front, and there's 3 torques to take care of that. All right, so this fuel quantity valve on this Sprinter is very similar to a Cummins. On a Cummins, there's also this very similar solenoid, and what it does is when like on a Cummins, if you have a Cummins that won't start, one of the tests it wants you to do is disconnect the fuel quantity valve on the pump. And if it starts, then that tells you that part is bad. what it does is it puts it into full max fuel pressure. And so it's very common for those to fail. So yeah, so they call it different things, but it's an actual regulating solenoid on the high pressure pump. Okay, so we got the fuel quantity valve in the fuel quantity solenoid in the high pressure pump. And as you can see, the reason that we don't rely on data is because you see how the data doesn't look like it's exactly the same, but the graph doesn't lie. So that graph right there shows you that it is exactly, like I said before, you should be able to lay the desired and actual on top of each other, and those two are identical. All right, just got done test driving this thing, and no check engine light, no codes, and look at that data after driving it at idle, under load, heavy throttle. So remember, on a diesel, unfortunately, sometimes it's a multiple step process to fix the vehicle, and also to get it, to get it fully repaired. So anyway, so we're gonna call this one good. You can see, if I rev it up, now you can see there's not a whole lot of fuel pressure change over here because there's not a lot of desired fuel. Now over here, where it has bigger humps, that's because I was driving and I was under load, and under load it requires more fuel volume, and that's why you're seeing that. The fuel pressure is going higher because it needs more fuel. Revving up a diesel engine doesn't require a lot of fuel. It's when it's under load is when it requires a lot of fuel. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this video. In this video, I showed you how a common rail works. I explained how all it takes is a couple bad injectors in an engine. Well, that one bad injector can keep it from starting, but a couple bad injectors can cause the fuel rail quantity to be low and to not be able to have the desired amount of fuel pressure. Also showed you how to replace these injectors in this thing. So I hope you feel comfortable doing this job, and if you've never worked on a Sprinter before, or if you're new to diesels, hopefully this helps you in your diagnostic path moving forward. So thanks for watching. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, you get notified of all my future content, which you're definitely going to want to see. Also check me out on Instagram at Nuts and Bolts with Tone for my daily life as a mechanic. Show you all kinds of cool stuff, and show you tools, everything in use. Check out my merchandise store where you can get yourself a t-shirt or coffee cup. Support Nuts and Bolts with Tone. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.